Awesome. Hey everyone, we will just give it a minute or two more to get started, and then I think we can kick this off. Of course, on second thought, it's probably awkward for us to all be sitting on stage right now, not saying anything. So I think we'll get going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Lombard live streams, or the Lombard Lounge. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but we have on today Mark and Matt from Katana, Jared and David from Sushi, and Bridge from Agora. And this is sort of a live stream to commence the launch of Katana. Katana went live yesterday. Super exciting new ecosystem. We're going to dive into why everybody's excited about this. We have both, the guys behind the chain and some of the ecosystem players, myself and Kev from the Lombard team. So this will be a fun one. Maybe we'll kick it off with just some intros if the Katana guys want to start.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me here, by the way. Exciting. I'm Mark Boron, the CEO at Polygon, who co-incubated Katana with GSR. I'm also contributing to Katana to help make sure it's successful.
Yeah, I'm Matthew. I'm working on business development on Katana, mostly focused on bringing in institutional liquidity and also like some protocol business development as well, and making people like Lombard successful.
Sweet. Sushi folks, you guys want to go next?
Yeah, I'll hop in on. My name's David. I'm CIO over at Sushi. I do spreadsheets and strategy. So I'm focused on incentives and growth and making sure that we have the liquidity efficiency to support all of the big dreams of Katana.
Hey everybody, I'm Jared Gray. I'm managing director at Sushi Labs, which is the team behind Sushi Swap. Yeah, excited to see Katana live and take it forward.
Awesome. And Agora?
I'm Bridge, and I lead partnerships and strategic projects at Agora. Agora is the stablecoin issuer of AUSD, which is the canonical stablecoin on Katana.
Awesome. And Kev, you want to kick it off on the Lombard side?
Yeah. Well, obviously, we're thrilled to bring LBDC on Katana, and then BTCK, our latest product to the Katana ecosystem. Obviously, Kev, I'm on the product side at Lombard. Been working behind the scenes with the Katana team for what seems like almost like a couple months now to bring this product to fruition. So we're really excited that we have everyone here and talk about what it is that we're doing and all of the great things that Katana is doing in the DeFi space alongside Sushi, Morpho, and Agora here.
Awesome. And hey, everyone, I'm Jacob, one of the co-founders of Lombard. I want to ask one sort of intro question to Mark before we kick it off with what makes everyone excited about Katana, which is, Mark, can you talk through the relationship between Polygon and Katana? I get this question every time I bring up Katana to somebody, but would love to hear it directly from the source.
Yeah, cool. So I won't spend too much time on it, but at a high level, Polygon's kind of core product that not many people kind of focus on. Everyone thinks of us as like Polygon as POS focused, but is a product called AgLayer. And the intention of this product is to really solve kind of cross-chain interoperability. A lot of interesting issues around like how that happens and things like that. But relevant for this conversation is that when you think about like cross-chain transactions, one of the things that you want is like a lot of efficiency in those transactions. You want it in any transaction, but I think it's particularly important here. And when we think about like chains that are on the AgLayer, if you assume there's going to be, I mean, we've already got hundreds of chains, right? But if you assume there's going to be hundreds of chains on the AgLayer and then thousands of chains and maybe even tens of thousands of chains, what you want those chains to be able to do is specifically focus on what they're good at and not need to worry about the things that they're not good at or spend time or money on things that they don't want to spend time or money. And one of those things for a lot of them is a DeFi ecosystem. It's like they want that to exist. They know their users want that, but they don't want that to take up the block space on their chain or to have to build up that infrastructure. The intention behind Katana is to actually provide that infrastructure for the entire AgLayer. So if you have a chain that has very deep liquidity and a great DeFi ecosystem, and then you have an interoperability solution like the AgLayer that allows you to go cross-chain securely in eventually sub 10 seconds and then sub 5 seconds and sub 1 second, then you can tap into that liquidity from any chain. And so one of the kind of hidden advantages that Katana has that many people don't realize is what's eventually going to be a very big ecosystem in the ag layer, where we expect like all of these chains to just be tapping into the liquidity that is on Katana from all of these different chains.
Awesome. I mean, I think this makes a ton of sense. It seems that that vision is resonating with everybody in the ecosystem. And I think it's very early into seeing what exactly that means in practice from the perspective of Katana or any of the other chains in the ag layer. Maybe one more intro question. Matt, you've been behind the scenes sort of facilitating the entire Katana launch, months in the making. Yesterday was the day. Well, yesterday was the beginning. You want to talk through sort of the experience there?
Yeah. I actually just joined in December. When I first saw like a job at Polygon on the DeFi team, I was actually kind of skeptical, to be honest. And it was like, what is Polygon doing in DeFi today? And then honestly, when I talked to Mark and heard his vision on like trying to solve this fragmentation issue in DeFi, like not only at the chain level, but also the protocol level and the asset level, which kind of brings us to like this deep partnership with Lombard, we got really pumped. So I think, we launched yesterday. I think we have about like 270 million in total deposits. I think about 170 of that is on mainnet. I would say give us like another like week and a half and it'll be like a seamless, like great experience. Like any kind of new chain, there's a few like kinks that we're still kind of like working through, but for the most part, pretty excited for what's to come.
Awesome. Quite the undertaking, but I think as you shared, tremendous success so far. Maybe I'll open this up to the ecosystem partners first, Sushi and Agora, and then Lombard, of course, would love to chime in here. But then we'll turn it over to the Katana guys to share their perspective. But can we all talk about sort of what gets us excited about Katana? Like, why is this an opportunity that all of us have sort of sunk our teeth into? I don't know who wants to take it away.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think from like Sushi's side and just kind of like a product roadmap vision, I've been at Sushi now 3 years, actually. I think in a week it'll be officially 3 years. And a lot of what we've focused on, obviously as a DEX, has been liquidity efficiency. For Sushi specifically, like a post-emissions world where, famously or infamously, whatever side you're on, the vampire attack that kind of established Sushi was kind of a textbook example of what liquidity is looking for and network effects that it can produce, but what happens afterwards, right? Like when those mercenary LPs, for lack of a better word, look to kind of replicate that yield opportunity. So a lot of what we've focused on is trying to aggregate for the user at Sushi over the last couple of years as we've built our aggregation into the DEX and then address, that post liquidity mining environment or world for ourselves. And I think the answer really is just a flywheel that produces sustainable outcomes. And I think Mark's team is, and the Katana thesis focuses on the entire picture, not just one portion of it, which I think in many instances with DeFi protocols or go-to-market focuses on the bootstrapping portion of their go-to-market. And so I'm actually really excited to see what this experiment produces for sustainable outcomes when we get past the initial bootstrapping phase and everyone's excited and everyone's bridging over and they're going to have a premier experience trading on Sushi or lending on Morpho or borrowing on Morpho and all of the other ecosystem partners that are all tier 1 providers. But what's it look like when we move into that, longer term vision? And I think that for my nearly 10 years in crypto, Katana is kind of the culmination of a lot of really great ideas that maybe just didn't work well on a longer term horizon. And I'm interested to see how that plays out. So.
Yeah, I can go from Agora's perspective. I think like the approach that Katana has is very mindful, and definitely like the sort of the idea of having like core partners has been hugely appealing for us. Just like the quality of each team is great, and yeah, having that assurance that like something's being built very mindfully for the users to benefit. And so when we're thinking about working with new partners, like for us, it's like always who's going to be around in 10 years, who's really building something that's going to last and offer real value to users. Obviously, the more that people can do with AUSD, like the more utility AUSD has. And so we're very excited to be a part of things. And as like the canonical stablecoin, we like also boost, I think, the DeFi Katana, and so like very excited to see how things go.
Awesome. Kev, you want to kick it off on the Lombard side?
Yeah, I actually agree with that entirely. I think one of the reasons why we're so excited to work with the Katana team is obviously a really big focus on liquidity, but then also just a commitment to the user, right? And when we speak from our side for Lombard, we are committed to giving BTC users what it is that they want. And the Katana team is so focused on how do we empower DeFi users. So for us, it's an opportunity to bring not only LBTC, right, representing a liquid yield-bearing token to the Katana ecosystem, but also BTCK, which is a yieldless version of a BTC token, and allow Katana and the applications built on top of Katana to provide such a quality user experience to the DeFi space. Really provide that like centralized exchange type UX that's going to onboard so many different users to the DeFi space. So I don't want to speak for you, Jacob, but I know that we've had conversations about this internally, and that's one of the reasons why we're so excited to, expand beyond LBTC. And the first way of doing that is with Katana, with BTCK.
Totally. Yeah, Kev talked about a little bit of the game plan for Lombard, and I think on a broader basis, I mean, Lombard has expanded to a lot of different ecosystems. We've explored launching on just about every chain in the game, but Katana very much feels net new or different, specifically because of the things that Breach was mentioning around how, they're really like every other ecosystem is like hyper competitive. There's like liquidity fragmentation across all of these users. Katana has sort of gone around and carefully shaped an ecosystem that is meant to be symbiotic. So like, we could invite all of the 6 other teams building core primitives on Katana on this call, and we're all because there is this sort of selection of primitives within the ecosystem, you end up with a lot what will end up being, I think, much deeper integrations, much better user experiences. My hope is that a lot of the applications look at AUSD and just can call it USD, create the right user experience for people. Same with LBTC and BTCK. You can just call it BTC. Like, I think that there's ways to craft the right user experience that usually, because of all of the complexities that DeFi, a permissionless DeFi ecosystem creates are like a non-starter. Now we're at the point where you can, build whatever users are looking for. And that only sort of came from, Katana sort of sitting back, thinking about like, okay, what are the challenges of DeFi? If we were going to build a new DeFi chain, how would we optimize this specifically for, for builders to be able to create the best user experience? Like my thought here is, at the end of the day, like this is a chain for builders ultimately. Mark, Matt, I kind of started to allude there, but what was the sort of idea? I mean, we talked a little bit at the beginning behind how Katana was meant to be optimized for a very narrow use case. Can you talk about some of the design decisions that went into Katana?
Yeah, happy to do that. I think there's like so there's a couple pieces to this. Most people focus on the mechanisms that generate like yield, because everyone wants to focus on the mechanisms. And when you do that, what you realize is you're like, oh, so this is like Blast, or this is like Barochain, or this is like Sonic. You could keep going down the list of things it's like. But ultimately, it's not like any of those from my perspective, because it's not intended to be built like any of those. To me, the mechanics and like the mechanisms that we have there are literally just tools to achieve what is actually a very different strategic approach, which you all have kind of touched on, right? Which is this idea of having these core primitives. Like, I often give the example of like you have a chain that has multiple versions of a DEX. It has Sushi, it has Uniswap, it has Aerodrome, it has QuickSwap. You could keep going down the list, and like you have $100 million in one, $100 million in the other, $50 million in the other, and $50 million in the other. That's $300 million of liquidity. But the deepest liquidity you could possibly hope to tap into is $100 million at any point in time. That's like significantly worse than aggregating all of that in 300 million. And like DEX aggregators do not solve that problem. They help with that problem, but they don't solve that problem. And so I think like when you look at like Sushi's aggregator, for example, like I think it's like fantastic for purposes of like making as efficient as you can an inefficient market. But what's much better is for Sushi to just be one efficient market. And the same is true on like the asset side. And, you can look at this and we can bring so many versions of BTC to the chain, right? But like ultimately that is just fragmenting the liquidity. What we're much better off is picking to work with a partner like Lombard, right? And saying, hey, people are going to trust Lombard. They've been around, they secure a lot of assets, their architecture is strong, people trust in it. So why do we need to bring so many different versions of BTC? Maybe you want one alternative. BTC holders are finicky, right? So like you never know, like maybe they want something a little bit different. And so you have two alternatives. But the idea of having 10 doesn't like really make sense. When you have those two alternatives and we think of like LBTC as an example, like we can really concentrate liquidity in LBTC. We don't have to worry about like any other liquid BTC, and we're going to get much deeper liquidity in that. So when you combine these two things, like a selection of protocols like Sushi and Morpho and Perptex and a Launchpad, and then same thing on like the asset side, when you look at, Lombard and EtherFi and AUSD and others that we've picked like that, what you can now get is concentrated liquidity within pools, within a protocol, and then even within pools, much more concentrated liquidity. This ends up making the difference. That is what everyone in finance has ever cared about. It's what anyone in DeFi cares about. When you think of DEX aggregators being 60 to 70% of the volume in DeFi, what do? They route to the deepest liquidity pools, right? Because they want the least slippage. And that's what this enables. And so all of these like mechanisms that you have around like Vault Bridge, which ends up being really cool because it does generate more yield that goes to users. You think of like AUSD and being able to take that revenue share and share it with the users, take sequencer fees, you share with the users. These are all means of actually being able to ensure that the liquidity deepens in Sushi and in Morpho and the other core partner protocols within the core assets that we're talking about here. And so that's going to create the experience that then allows retail to get a better, simpler, more efficient experience, whales and institutions to be able to come in more size. And that's ultimately like what people want. And it's like, to your point, Jacob, it's a net new that we haven't actually seen in the ecosystem. And I always say, like, whether it succeeds or not, I don't know. I think it has a pretty good shot of succeeding. But what I will say is that it is a different approach that gives a shot of succeeding, and that ultimately is different from what exists today. And that's ultimately what you need to do to try to get to a different outcome than what exists today.
Definitely. Matt, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say like we're not as interested in like the logo logo kind of partnerships. Like we pick kind of like the partners for a reason that can like have confidence that the liquidity that's there in the beginning will be there in 6 months, will be there in a year from now. Gives them an opportunity to focus on creating like much deeper integrations like between each other, and also kind of trying to tap into like the next millions of users. I don't know if I would say billions of users yet, but maybe we'll get there. And so yeah, like definitely excited about that. And to Mark's point as well, I don't know if like analogies are necessarily fair, but I would say that so many things have kind of been experimented on in DeFi over like the past 2 cycles that we've been able to like learn from a lot of other people and like what have went right and what have went wrong. So there have been like some analogies and they're fair, but we've been able to like learn from that and kind of optimize around certain things.
Nice. All really good points. The idea that this is a net new form of DeFi experimentation, I think, is a really great point. And who knows, if this is successful, maybe all future chains end up getting built sort of in this manner, at least from an ecosystem perspective. And
yeah, I guess I would just chime in real quick on like,
yeah.
not to interrupt you, but the way Katana's design is like really difficult to do retroactively. So any chain that's like already live, it's almost impossible to kind of go back and be like, hey, like we want to work with them and like them. There's like obviously more of a political element to crypto than like might meet the eye. So
Right.
I think like for net new chains, yeah, it's definitely possible. But for chains that already exist, it'll be really tough. Like
Right,
Arbitrum has a great DeFi ecosystem, tons of builders there. Like, you can't really do certain things that you can do from like day one.
100%. And I mean, I think this ties in great to what I was just about to say, which was, you know, I feel like I have seen just in the time I've been in crypto a shift in almost like power or distribution power away from chains to the actual applications, in a sense of like the you know, it used to be that like when Lombard first started working with you know, in the ecosystem, we were going to chains, and chains were doing these big incentive programs, and they were like driving a lot of usage. And now it's like very clear to me that like the long-term sustainable fundamental usage comes from users going to an application, and that application has like found a home on a specific chain because that chain is serving its needs in one way or another. And at the end of the day, it's like these builders, a builder on a chain, somebody who's building the next great perp dex or the next great borrow lend protocol or something like that, they need certain tools. They need a stable coin, they need some Bitcoin, they need a DEX, they need a lending protocol if they're not already a lending protocol. Like they need all of these primitives. And to some degree, you know, they certainly have some preferences on like what a good protocol is or what a bad protocol is. Or more importantly, I think they're probably predominantly worried about like security and capital efficiency. But provided you find like a competitive protocol in those categories, having all of those primitives like at their, you know, at their disposal in the best form possible, right? Like no liquidity fragmentation, really deep integrations throughout the ecosystem. This ends up being like probably the best place to build a DeFi protocol on. All of the problems that you would have had to run into beforehand, you don't have to worry about. Matt, we've spent a lot of time you know, with the Lombard SDK trying to, you know, create these really native Bitcoin experiences within projects and other ecosystems. But the challenge you just described is always what prevents it. It's like, oh, sorry, that like there, we already have 6 other Bitcoins on here. I don't even know, like the idea of me trying to go through a transition plan to try and, you know, coalesce around native Bitcoin deposits or some like unified Bitcoin experience would just be an absolute nightmare. Katana, this is like the precedent in the ecosystem from the beginning.
Yeah, I don't know if that was rhetorical, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
We should just have Jacob with a little bit more of a awkward moment of silence there. I have some thoughts on it, but I was going to let it sit for a little. Jacob, you're 1000% right, and that's why we want to work with Katana. I mean, there's almost like 2 thoughts to it. It's like, how do you attract the best applications to build around the chain? You need to empower them with the best building experience, right? That includes the core infrastructure, which obviously Katana is handling, but you need to have the financial infrastructure around it with the primitives, per your point, without giving them too much to overwhelm them. And that's one of the things that we're able to incorporate with the SDK, specifically with Katana as well. If you want a yield-bearing token, you go and you offer your users the ability to have LBTC, or you empower the applications building on Katana to give their users LBTC. But if they just want a fast, quick, very, very quick moving BTC asset that they can provide that like centralized exchange experience, then they go with BTCK, right? So there's like two sides of the coin here, no pun intended, where it's like building infrastructure, which Katana is obviously able to handle, but though that vision of like a financial infrastructure with the primitive tools that you had just mentioned, that when you bring those together, I think that this will absolutely become a success for sure.
Yeah, this is also interesting. Like it's true for Lombard. It's also true for Agora. Like, one thing I hadn't appreciated about this when I thought about it was like the simplicity of it. So like most ecosystems have become so complicated, right? Because like you don't really know like what asset to go hold, what protocol to go use. And one of the things that was not intentional, but that I started getting feedback on quite a bit was, oh, I love the simplicity of this. And I think there is value in that when you don't really need to think about what you're going to do. You have like a decision made for you, and it's something that is known, trusted, like just go ahead and use it. And I think that's like, I think that's one nice thing about the Katana that'll end up kind of benefiting users.
Totally. I was going to say users are the ones who are going to love that. Developers, I think it simplifies their life a little bit, but users steal the show. And honestly, all of the best DeFi, all the best applications I can think of that were built in like the past 6 months have done this on other chains, probably painfully. But yeah, Kev, thanks for breaking the silence there. Maybe I'll pass it over to maybe the Sushi folks if you guys want to run through a little bit about like what's ahead. Sushi's had one hell of a long journey, a lot of different products in the pipeline. I mean, what are you guys sort of building on Katana that'll get people excited?
Yeah, well, the first thing is like Sushi has gone through a lot, like you just said. Like we went through an emissions phase when we got to the end of our token distribution and basically hit a wall and learned a lot of lessons in that distribution. We maybe weren't the first, but very close to the first to do liquidity mining and incentivize people to deposit into pools with our own token emissions. So as we've learned lessons from that, we've been looking for a place that is in alignment with longevity, basically lasting beyond the mint. And when Katana became an opportunity, we immediately latched on and said, okay, this is great. So with that in mind, sustainability in mind, Sushi is able to kind of like look into the future of where Katana is going, what the ag layer means, what it would look like to have an actual liquidity hub, not just the idea of a liquidity hub, not a fake liquidity hub via aggregators, which we do very well. We like aggregators a lot. But so we have a very solid kind of end goal in mind of what the purpose of Katana is and where Sushi fits in on that roadmap of Katana. And so you know, I feel very empowered by Katana because we are basically a middleman for incentives. Uh, we are in a position that we know where we want to be, and we have the resources, the long-term sustainable resources, to not only build it and bootstrap it and get us there, but to maintain it, theoretically indefinitely, which is a stark difference from any other chain that we're kind of working on right now. Nobody else is doing anything looking 5 years into the future. Everybody's looking at like, hey, how do I extract as much value in the next year? And so everything that we're doing is kind of like aimed at, okay, how do we make Sushi a forever platform? How do we do that on Katana? How do we actually solve the problems that people are having with DeFi? How do we make crypto, um, more usable to the users? So um, Sushi's got a lot of stuff in our pipeline. We're doing UX UI changes. We're integrating more deeply with all these other partners. One of the most beautiful things, and you guys hinted on it a bunch in the last conversation, was like the alignment with the partnerships. The partnership alignment is outstanding, and so like really the sky's the limit to what can be built. And we are in a group with all these people that are all working towards the same theme. We have our own goals, we have our own objectives, but like the theme and solving the problem for the user is common between all of us. And so we're able to build together, we're able to grow together. And yeah, I don't know how much stuff I'm actually allowed to talk about. Our roadmap is pretty extensive, but like short term, it's going to be UX UI with a focus on, allowing access to the most efficient markets possible. And basically everything Sushi's doing right now is kind of pointed towards Katana. We see you guys as a big deal, and we're basically applying all of our resources to it. So I don't know, Jared, can we talk about some of the engineering roadmap stuff? I don't want to do the geeky leaks.
I was gonna say I personally vote you guys talk about it, but hey,
yeah, sure. No,
That's such a good point. I'm like totally in favor of it.
Sure, yeah, no problem. It's kind of like I keep thinking this is like an X Spaces, and I go to hit like the hearts and the hundreds and stuff, and there's nothing there. So, but with David, yeah, I mean, leaks are fine, right? I think our product roadmap was majorly focused on, the multi-chain approach, which was kind of codified in governance when I came on as head chef back in 2022. Sitting thinking about product for years now, and watching the space kind of evolve, and then having an opportunity like Katana that does solve one of kind of the key issues that we have, again, which is liquidity, access to liquidity, sustainable liquidity outcomes, a flywheel that then produces user outcomes that are desirable and that people want to seek out and take part in. So there's a scalable element here that makes our product roadmap and the ambitions that we have, attainable, where I think a lot of the industry, especially with networks, when they're, their go-to-market, and I know this because they come to us kind of regularly and they ask, hey, can you launch a native DEX? We want a new token. And that's fine. I think that serves some go-to-market strategies for networks. But for us, it's more like, well, that, fractures our attention to serving our core token and our core outcome under the Sushi brand. And so, how do we fix that? So I think with Katana actually having a liquidity hub, again, I love the ag layer thesis, being able to be like a cross-chain liquidity nexus. I think Marky coined that term on a reply to my X thread when we first announced Katana and Sushi working together. And I really liked that because, Sushi was one of the first cross-chain enabled DEXs. And so that's been core to the multi-chain approach as well. As far as the product roadmap for us, we have and we've leaked some of this stuff already, or it's actually maybe even a few of them have gone out in official press releases. But last year we did an acquisition of another DeFi protocol, and we've since retooled it and we'll rebrand it. It's called Blade, and Blade is like at its core, it's a pricing engine that allows non-custodial deposits in an AMM that are less exposed to impermanent loss. And the goal there is to give these mature assets like Ethereum and Bitcoin depositors the ability to LP and earn fees without being exposed to the volatility of loss versus rebalance and the impermanent loss that it kind of extends from that experience. And so Katana will be the go-to-market for Blade, so that should be out in the next few weeks. We've spent a lot of time on the UX side and rebuilding the app really from the ground up, like full refactor. We brought on a dedicated project and product manager. And so you'll see new improvements over the next 2-3 weeks that'll be live on Katana, and then the wider Sushi app for trading terminal approach, kind of what you've seen in the Solana ecosystem. I think because their chain kind of focused on that, and Jupiter, I think, did a really great job. So we've taken lessons from across the space and we've built them into the product experience, the trading experience on Sushi, and all of that stuff will roll out. Some other things too, I think that'll be really interesting that I kind of want to leave, I think, for future releases. But yeah, I mean, I think having deep liquidity and in a central network where that experience is paramount is really important. Mark, you talked about that a minute ago. Yeah, aggregator was more of a means to an end for us, and not necessarily the product approach that we wanted to completely cement ourselves around. But I think it allowed us to extend access of inventory, of token inventory, to users that, while the liquidity side of the DEX became more competitive and we had to reimagine, allowed us to serve those users, attract users, and we're excited about what Katana offers us on the product side with liquidity. So again, I just go back to the sustainable outcomes and what that means for us in the experiment. And for me, I'm just the most excited about that, tooling that back into the product at the protocol level.
Awesome. That's great to hear. A lot in the pipeline. Katana, all about simplicity, but sounds like some complexity from Sushi coming to the chain as well, which will be exciting. Yeah, Breach, do you want to maybe talk about what's in the pipeline for Agora?
Yeah, from our side, it's just really exciting, I think, being involved with so many different builders who are obviously really attracted to Katana, and hearing what Sushi's doing and what you guys are doing, what Morpho's doing is really cool. And I know that you the Katana Hadron founders thing is going to be very interesting to see what sort of new projects come through that pipeline as well, because with Agora, it's what we do is we really augment all of these things. So it's the cash reserves of Agora, AUSD, they generate revenue, which we then share with the Katana Foundation, and then they get sort of fed through into the specific AUSD pools, which obviously is a massive plus for users. Like that's just like a huge benefit there. So from our side, yeah, the more activity that and TVL from Katana with AUSD means like the more that we can then give back and like really fuel that flywheel. So
awesome. Ties directly into my next question, which would be Mark or Matt. Could you guys maybe talk a little bit about, you sort of got the core primitives in place with some of the folks here on this call and a couple others who couldn't join. And but what does the path look like forward for Katana specifically? How are you guys thinking about attracting native builders? What kind of stuff are you expecting to see built on the chain?
Yeah, I'll leave that, Matt, all yours.
I think in like the beginning, like any kind of new chain, especially in the DeFi space, like a lot of the target market will be like on the DeFi degens. But we do have like one fintech who will be integrating kind of Katana earn product in like the back end, and like over the intermediate to like longer term, we definitely are like working towards those seamless like user experiences that the Robinhood users of the world, I guess, like who's top of mind right now, obviously, like come to know and love. And so, yeah, I think like it's been kind of very meaningful that we've been able to leverage a lot of Polygon's relationships and on and off ramps that is already provided to be able to kind of build towards the liquidity that doesn't need 20% APY every day, but that is like fine with 6 to 8%. That's stickier and kind of like there for like the longer term, and that you can then go build like a bunch of different experiences like on top of that. So definitely like looking for a lot of applications to build interesting and unique front ends that appeal to different audiences like over time. And then we also have like an institutional work stream that maybe Mark can touch on too.
Yeah, got definitely some institutional stuff on the like the way that on the works. Like the way that I think about this is like people like think that you should focus on like one set of users in DeFi, like an institutional user or whale or retail, but like the best like DeFi experience and really like trading in general like mixes retail with not. Like you need informed and uninformed order flow, right? And that's like really what everyone wants. Like really like the simple way of putting it and slightly crude way of putting it is like institutions need to like eat retail. Like that's like the reality. Like the whales are going to eat the fish. Like all of those is actually just true. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a set of retailers who like retail users who are sophisticated and actually have a chance of actually benefiting from the chain and frankly having the experience that they want. And you kind of hope that ultimately you get to a spot where retail can outcompete institutions in certain cases. And I think that having a chain that is actually positive sum gives us like a possibility. And what I mean by that, right, is like if you look at most chains, like it's not most chains, honestly, it's most of finance. You're kind of in a spot where it's like negative sum or zero sum. And I think all of finance is like that to some degree. The question is like, can you actually tip odds in favor of being more positive sum? And this is something that I think Katana actually does well, which is why it's interesting for all of these people, right? Which is like when you're pulling yield from all of these different sources. And if you really think about it, like if you think of like the L1 yield that you can generate on VaultBridge, or you think about like the AUSD yields, what you're talking about there is like yield that is not necessarily coming from users necessarily on the chain, or it's users who are taking the exact same risk that they otherwise have. Like let's take an example of a user who deposits an asset like I don't know, ETH. They deposit ETH in Morpho to come to Katana, and then they deposit that ETH in Morpho again. Like that is like actually positive sum. The user's taking like effectively the exact same smart contract risk. They're taking lower or equal risk when it comes to lending those assets on L1. And there's more yield now to be generated for that user to either win more money or lose less money. That's actually like a massive positive that you don't like otherwise have. And so this is all a long way of saying, like, from my perspective, we've got more than, what do we got, around 30 apps that have either deployed or will be deploying and assets. within like this first week, which is a pretty good start. Our focus is really on like these higher quality apps rather than just like number of apps ultimately. But that's like good because that gives like interesting things for retail to do. Then we've got the institutional workflow, as Matt mentioned, with like a fintech already aligned to come, more in the works, that allows like another type of flow to come. We also have like the relationship with GSR and other market makers where you do get like a ability to have like a much more efficient market than what you typically have on many new chains who don't have those relationships. So like if you think of a market maker, typically on a new chain's like not going to have like a big market maker who's actually there to help with efficiency in the markets. Like just doesn't typically exist on day one. In our case, A, we've got multiple of them, but B, what's actually really cool is that we have one in GSR, given that they co-incubated Katana, who isn't actually just here to like maximize their returns, right? Typically you get a market maker who's useful, by the way, even if they are maximizing their own returns, but they're there to basically like eat retail if they can, right? And in our case, we've got a market maker who's here and they're actually here just to make the system more efficient because they already have upside as a cat holder. And they actually benefit from the chain just performing well, much more than they do from making like a few bucks off of retail. So it's a very long way of saying like lots of interesting apps, institutional kind of like momentum building up, but really most importantly, like a good user environment from day one, given like everyone who's involved.
Awesome. I love how you guys are thinking about that. Institutions and institutional adoption has become a little bit of a hot narrative, so everybody's latching onto it. But I think you're totally right. Growth is path dependent, and you need retail to entice the institutions to come in. No insta, like I don't think there's ever been like an insto only product that has worked in crypto, though in every category someone has tried. So I think that's spot on. Certainly a ton of success with retail and early adopters already through the Vault Bridge program and the pre-deposit vaults. So exciting stuff. Maybe, and we're sort of running up on time here a little bit, but maybe I'll just pass it around to everybody for some closing thoughts here. In fact, maybe I'll sort of kick it off. I mean, feel free to take this in whatever direction you guys want, but I think Lombard is just incredibly excited about the opportunity to participate in Katana. I think we can craft some very tightly integrated Bitcoin experiences that we would struggle to craft on any other chain. So I think that in terms of, I usually joke that like Hyperliquid is the best Bitcoin DeFi app right now because of how tightly they've integrated Bitcoin into the core app. This is going to be a staple for apps on Katana if Lombard has anything to do with it. And now it just feels like the perfect time for this. There's sort of been a little bit of a lull in the ecosystem. I think we had like a suite of chains launch at the beginning of the year that sort of, didn't live up to fruition. There's been a little bit of, the dust has kind of settled. And now I think Katana is laying the foundation for what will hopefully be the next stage of growth for DeFi. So pumped to be working with everyone in this call and those who couldn't make it. And I think big things are ahead. I'll sort of leave the floor open for whoever wants to hop in.
I will just say really quickly. Oh, go for it. No, go for it.
All right. Just one thing I want to highlight that we didn't really talk much about is like, and I say it a lot if you guys have had meetings with me, velocity is super important to me. How often are we using each asset? Multiplying that multiplies all the positive benefits of the chain. So that's something that, Agora and Lombard and Katana, even on a network level through the Vault Bridge, is doing. Every asset that's already on the chain is already being used twice. How do we multiply that? How do we get that going further and further? And Agora is doing that, and Lombard doing that as well. So one thing I wanted to like highlight and maybe challenge like anyone that might be listening and building and thinking about building is like, how do we increase that? Because that is the metric that, in my opinion, from maybe Sushi's data perspective, that's the one metric that could really set us apart from everywhere else. Velocity. How often are we using each asset? Sushi's working on projects to do that with some idle asset kind of stuff, but that's kind of my food for thought and my highlight for the alignment that we all have in the how do we get the most usage, how do we get the most benefit out of this whole project.
Yeah, I love this. This is consistent with this idea. Like when we think of internal metrics for Katana, we always talk about this term productive TVL. It's not just like we don't care about TVL actually, which is like, you know, some teams like that, some don't. Obviously results in less assets, and that's, you know, good and bad depending on your perspective, but it does result in more use of those assets. And I think that's valuable for like a couple reasons, right? Like as an asset issuer on the chain, what it means is that like the users who are holding your asset are actually like benefiting from the use of your asset, which actually, in my opinion, is going to make them more like wanting to hold your asset when they can actually do more with it, and it's more desirable to hold it. From like an app's perspective, if you're actually incentivized to use it, then you're going to actually make more money as an app from those users. And then from like a user's perspective, assuming apps create great experiences, assets are good to hold, then like users actually have the experience that they want. And so it ends up just being like more holistic. And so like actually driving the incentive to use apps and use assets ends up creating that velocity that you're talking about, David, there in a way that's really kind of beneficial. And then before I shut up, I will just say that I think the one of the cool things about Katana, I think, and we kind of touched on it in passing on some of this, is I think the experience of actually working with builders in this space and like what that looks like. I could say like on the Katana side, like being able to have this close group that we can coordinate with and actually think about like how do we execute in a way that ends up creating like the best user experience. Like we sit here and we think like, hey, as LBTC comes onto Katana, what is the type of liquidity that we want sitting, you know, in X, Y, and Z pool to make sure that that's the best user experience. So this is very different from like most other chains, right? Where like it's very hard to spend the time to actually focus on that because there's so many different assets doing like that are coming to the chain. It's like it's and Lombard team can speak for themselves. I don't know what their experience is like on other chains, but I think it's probably pretty hard for them, and same thing for Agora, to like actually get a team who's going to sit there and say, hey, let's work together on like the optimal DeFi pools, lending pools, how we actually incentivize these different pools, and do that on a continuous basis. And being able to do that on Katana is actually pretty cool. And so far, it's been like fun to do that with these teams.
Yeah, I think from like AUSD, like absolutely agree with Mark. Like we're fundamentally aligned with like the productive TVL philosophy. Like the approach of Agora is like not to sort of charge rent for stablecoin flow. It's like to actively participate in sort of like delivering value. And like yeah, so the more AUSD that sort of exists on Katana, the more that we can contribute as well. So
Yeah,
Awesome.
I guess to just, you know,
Yep,
bookend this. Yeah, sorry, just kind of bookend the sushi kind of goals or, you know, expectations here. Really, from my side, and I think David and Mark nailed, you know, the liquidity, the incentives, the side of the thing. I think seeing how this all plays into an outperformance or exceeding expectations of users in their trading experience. I'm excited to see, you know, what we can build on top and what other builders can build on top of Sushi as kind of this liquidity hub or nexus that empowers them to do things that they're not going to get at other networks. And so I think that there are some things we'll probably do that we don't know yet, you know, could be outperformers. But yeah, I really am excited to see for users what Katana enables. And so, yeah, Sushi's going to be there to make it happen. So reach out and fill David's inbox up if you're a builder and want to partner with us on Katana.
Awesome. You heard the man. Flood David's inbox. Cool. All right. Well, I think that'll pretty much wrap it up. Lots of exciting things ahead. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm just actually realizing that there is a concurrent Katana panel happening right now in Con. So, you know, we've got the in-person, you know, event. We've got the live stream going, hitting this from all angles, growing the Katana ecosystem. Good stuff, folks. Cool. Thanks everyone for joining. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys next time.
Thanks,
Thanks
Andrew.
for
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.